And maybe there's somebody we need to mute here. Senegal, we are going to mute them. We are now formally launching this event. Excellencies, dear colleagues, good morning to who is with us at the International Environment House in Geneva. And good morning, good afternoon, or good evening to who is with us on WebEx or is now watching the video of this event. The Geneva Environment Network has the pleasure to welcome you today for a briefing co-organized with the United Nations Environment Programme, Pakistan and Switzerland on the implementation of the United Nations Environment Assembly resolution on the environmental aspects of minerals and metals management. The Global Intergovernmental Meeting on Minerals and Metals will take place on 7 and 8 September this year in Geneva, back-to-back with the 2023 edition of the World Resources Forum. This is therefore a process of interest for International Geneva that counts many activities and processes on mineral resources management. Our session today will present and discuss the resolution and how different stakeholders are engaging or would engage in the process. Laura Platschkov, Switzerland National Focal Point for the resolution, will chair this session. Before I hand over to Laura, let me remind you that the documents presented, the summary, as well as the video of the event, will be made available on the webpage of this event. The link is being shared in the chat for who is online or available on the screen. Throughout the event, those who are online can raise their questions by using the Q&A box. We will use your questions to feed the discussion after the presentation if time allows. Also, for who is online with us, the transcription is available at the bottom left of your screen. So if English is not your first language, there are various languages available also over there. With that, Laura, over to you.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Diana, and good morning, afternoon, and evening to all in the room, and also those joining us online for this briefing on the implementation of the UNEA Resolution 5/12 on environmental aspects of minerals and metals management. So my name is Laura Platschkov, and I'm a senior policy advisor at the Swiss Federal Office for the Environment and also the Swiss National Focal Point for this resolution. As you know, in this resolution, the United Nations Environment Assembly invited stakeholders from both the public and private sectors to align their mining practices and their investments in mining with the 2030 Agenda for Sustainable Development. The UNEA also requested UNEP Executive Director to convene a series of intergovernmental consultations, including with relevant stakeholders, with the aim of developing non-prescriptive proposals to enhance the environmental sustainability of minerals and metals. Those proposals will be considered at UNEA 6 in February 2024. So today's event will discuss the implementation of the resolution, but also present opportunities for stakeholders' engagement, cooperation, and also identify synergies with this process. We are really delighted to have this event today because the topic of sustainable management of minerals has never been so high on the global political environment agenda. And for good reasons. Minerals underpin our societies. They are essential for the energy transition, infrastructure, digitalization, just to name a few. At the same time, we know the detrimental environmental impacts they can cause, which we have to minimize. With an expected 500% increase in the demand for minerals, the environmental challenges are going to be even more acute. So this is a topic of importance to all countries, and as a country with low resources, Switzerland is well aware that this is not only a question of ecological responsibility, it also serves economic interest because minerals are needed to almost every sectors of the economy, and not least social interest because environmental impacts have direct impact on human well-being. So this is the backbone of Switzerland engagement in this process and also interest in co-chairing this process. Unfortunately, Martin Rohn, who is the Swiss co-chair for this process, was not able to attend today's event, but I can convey her strong engagement. So today we are very fortunate to have a great panel of experts from different organizations that will provide their perspectives on addressing the environmental sustainability of minerals and how to collaborate with this process. Many of the organizations speaking today are based in Geneva, and Geneva is indeed a very relevant place for this discussion with the presence of much environmental expertise, activities, and organization active in this field. So before we get started, I would also like to warmly thank the Geneva Environment Network, Diana and her team for hosting this event and putting together such a great panel. So now it's a great pleasure for me to invite Her Excellency, Mrs. Sakleen Sieda, the High Commissioner and Permanent Representative of Pakistan to the United Nations Environment Programme and also co-chair of the Intergovernmental Regional Consultations on Minerals and Metal Management to provide opening remarks. Dear Ambassador, you are online. I see you. You have the floor, please.
Thank you, Laura. Thank you so much. Good morning, good afternoon, everyone, excellencies, distinguished representatives, colleagues, ladies and gentlemen. It gives me great pleasure to share a few opening remarks in my capacity as the co-chair of the Intergovernmental Regional Consultations and Global Intergovernmental Meeting for UNEA Resolution 5/12 on environmental aspects of minerals and metals management. It has been almost 1 year since the resolution was adopted at the 5th resumed session of the United Nations Environment Programme, and in the last months, we've been putting together the elements of the implementation plan for this resolution. UNEA 5.2 was heralded as the most successful UNEA session to date. Not only was it a landmark resolution to end the plastic pollution towards an internationally legally binding instrument adopted. But so was the resolution to establish a science policy panel to contribute further to the sound management of chemicals and waste and to prevent pollution. Of the 14 resolutions adopted altogether, the one which is the subject of today's event also represents a critical opportunity for the Environment Assembly. As mentioned earlier, it has not been on one of the top agendas, but now it has taken its due place. It's going to take its due place in the next coming months and years. The resolution we are discussing today is highly relevant as it builds on UNEA Resolution 4/19 on mineral resource governance. And given the focus on minerals and metals, it is interlinked with resolutions on sustainable, resilient, and inclusive recovery, circular economy, and sustainable infrastructure. The resolution also provides a renewed opportunity to accelerate action and collaboration on these topics at all levels. The topic of minerals and metals is critical for energy transition, an agenda which not only impacts producing countries as well as consumer countries, but will also have implications for our environment. For the Environment Assembly, it is paramount that minerals for the transition will be developed in a manner that integrates environmental sustainability and responsibility to ensure positive outcomes for people and the planet. The resolution acknowledges that clean technologies highly depend on metals and minerals are important for combating climate change and stresses the important contribution that the sustainable management of metals and minerals make to achieving the 2030 agenda. At the same time, the resolution recognizes the regulatory and administrative capacity challenges faced by the countries. In addition, it encourages member states and invites relevant stakeholders active along the full life cycle of minerals and metals to align mining practices and investments with the 2030 agenda. By focusing on mineral resource governance, as well as addressing the environmental aspects of minerals and metals management, the Environment Assembly is joining the long list of entities in this shared commitment and shared understanding that business cannot carry on as usual. I look forward to the discussions today on how we can ensure that member states and stakeholders can join hands to strengthen the environmental aspects of minerals and metals. You will hear from UNEP about the plans for the regional intergovernmental consultations. It will become clear that there remains a lot of work ahead of us in the run-up to September Global Intergovernmental Meeting. I urge you all to engage and participate to ensure the effective implementation of this resolution. And I look forward to meeting many of you at the global meeting in Geneva. Thank you, everyone.
Thank you. Thank you very much, dear Ambassador, for your inspiring words. Now I would like to give the floor to Elisa Tonda, who is the Chief of the Resource and Market Branch of United Nations Environment Programme here in Geneva, to provide welcoming remarks on behalf of UNEP. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Laura. And it is a pleasure for me to be here with all of you today for this briefing session on the resolution of the United Nations Environment Assembly, the resolution 5/12, that is focusing on environmental aspects of minerals and metals management. And what I'm going to do in this opening remark is just to give you a sense of why the subject of this resolution is so important for UNEP, prior to making reference shortly to the process of implementation of these resolutions. As alluded to in earlier interventions, minerals and metals are an essential component of our lives, and specifically of the clean energy and the green energy, green economy transitions. As discussed in some of the documents that underpinned earlier resolutions of the United Nations Environment Assembly, we mine every year around 115 billion tons of rock, and out of this we produce 65 billion tons of mineral products, 72 billion tons of waste rock, and 13 billion tons of mine-tailing waste. And we're only going to see the demand of these minerals and critical minerals increase as we're shifting towards renewable energy and related technologies. According to the International Environmental Energy Agency, in a scenario that meets the Paris Agreement goals, the demand from clean technologies on those minerals and metals is going to increase to over 40% for copper and other rare earth elements, 60–70% for nickel and cobalt, and almost 90% for lithium. We understand clearly that this growing demand is a fact, but that growth in demand should also accelerate our efforts to ensure that those increased demand are not coming with augmented stress on people and on the environment in extractive locations. And it is squarely in this context, and recognizing the very strong interlinkages between this sector and the three crises of pollution, biodiversity loss, and climate change, that UNEP's work in the context of the medium-term strategy 2022-2025 is shaped. In the context of our work, and as alluded to in earlier intervention, UNEP is also offering secretariat support to the process of implementation of this resolution. And I would want to take the opportunity to introduce the UNEP secretariat team that is following this session online or in person. The colleagues who are part of the secretariat team at UNEP are Ms. Sharon Gill, Ms. Charlotte Ndakorewa, and Ms. Angela Kariuki. And we also rely on the very strong technical support of a collaborating center of UNEP, GRID Geneva, that is headed by Mr. Pascal Pedruzzi, who is with us today as well. And let me conclude by recognizing the incredible support that UNEP has received, an incredible guidance that UNEP has received by the two esteemed co-chairs of this process, the co-chairs of the Intergovernmental Regional Consultation and the Global Intergovernmental Meeting. Her Excellency Ms. Saklain Siada, the High Commissioner of the Islamic Republic of Pakistan and Permanent Representative of Pakistan to United Nations Environment Programme, and Ms. Martine Ron-Brossard, the Deputy Head of the International Affairs Division of the Swiss Federal Office for the Environment. We're very thankful for the guidance that the co-chair have been offering to the UNEP team in the Secretariat, and very much look forward to working with the co-chairs going forward. And I look forward to today's discussion. Laura, I'm handing the floor back to you.
Thank you very much, Elisa, for this word that really show the importance of this process and the global picture which is behind all these efforts. Now I would like to invite Charlotte Ndakorera, from a program management officer at UNEP, who is in Elisa's team, to provide an update on the preparation for the implementation of the UNEA resolution. Dear Charlotte, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Laura. Next slide, please. Good morning, everyone. I would like to take the opportunity today to briefly introduce the resolution, its requests, and also the plans of implementation. So you will see that this UNEA 5 resolution on environmental aspects of minerals and metals really, first of all, focuses on the entire life cycle of minerals and metals, and also really invites the participation of all stakeholders, so member states, but also international organizations, multilateral environmental agreements, and other stakeholders. The first request we have in the resolution is in its operating paragraph 2, and there is a request for UNEP to convene transparent and inclusive intergovernmental regional consultations with all stakeholders, which will then feed into a global intergovernmental meeting. And the aim of these meetings is the development of non-prescriptive proposals to enhance the environmental sustainability of minerals and metals. Next slide, please. There are two other requests in this resolution. In operating paragraph 4, there's a specific reference to strengthen scientific, technical, and policy knowledge with regard to sand. And this work is being led by UNEP Grid Geneva. And then finally, the third request relates to the compilation of a report on knowledge gaps in relation to environmental aspects of tailings management. Next slide, please. So at UNEP, we started the implementation of this resolution last year, and it started really with an outreach exercise to member states and other stakeholders. We have requested member states to nominate focal points to be engaged in the process of implementing the resolution and also participating in the intergovernmental meetings. So far, we've received the nomination of 47 national focal points, and we're still requesting member states to continue the submission of nominating focal points if they haven't done so already. As was already mentioned, we have two co-chairs for this process from Pakistan and Switzerland. And in the upcoming months, we will be organizing a number of outreach events in the form of briefings and webinars with member states, but also other stakeholders to socialize the resolution and also show opportunities for engagement for stakeholders in the resolution. In advance of the intergovernmental meetings, we will be preparing a background document that will guide the discussions during the meetings, and the outcome of the meetings will be captured in the UNEP Executive's report, which will be finalized by November 2023. Next slide, please. While the intergovernmental meetings will engage member states of UNEP and international organizations, multilateral environmental agreements, accredited organizations are also very much part of this process. And I wanted to just take a minute to share some information on the accreditation process for organizations that are not yet accredited with UNEP. The accreditation with UNEP gives an organization consultative status with UNEP and at the UN Environment Assembly, which basically means an observer status. And in concrete terms, this means that accredited organizations receive background documents, working documents at the same time as member states and are able to make written contributions to the process. They're also able to participate in all of the intergovernmental meetings and make contributions, so written but also verbally. And in case you wish to seek accreditation with UNEP, there are only a few requirements to be eligible, and this is that your organization has to be registered for at least 2 years. It has to be a non-governmental, not-for-profit making organization with a focus on the environment, and the activities have to take place at the national level, but also internationally. I've included the link where you can get more information on the accreditation process. Perhaps also to mention it generally takes 3 months to get accredited with UNEP, and so we would like to encourage you to seek accreditation as soon as possible and to be ready to participate in the upcoming intergovernmental meetings. Next slide, please. So on this slide, you will see the dates of the upcoming regional and global consultations. The first ones will be the Eastern European and Western European and other states consultations, which will take place in April. The Eastern European one will take place in Geneva, whereas the Western European one will take place in Paris. The Asia-Pacific consultation will take place on 16th, 17th of June in Bangkok. And we're still finalizing the dates for the African consultation, which will be hosted by Senegal, as well as the dates and location for the Latin American Caribbean consultation. And as mentioned, the global intergovernmental consultation will take place on the 7th and 8th of September in Geneva. The meetings will be organized in a hybrid format. That means in person, but also with a virtual connection. Funding will be provided to eligible member states representatives from developing countries. The first day of the consultations will focus on the development of non-prescriptive proposals, whereas the second day will focus on the topics of sand and tailings management. Next slide, please. So as mentioned, one of the objectives of the consultations will be the development of non-prescriptive proposals. And the next 2 slides will highlight a bit or give some guidance on what non-prescriptive proposals could look like. I will not go so much in the details in the interest of time, but just to mention that we've outlined here different categories of what they could look like. So they could be standards or regulation of different nature. We've also highlighted here a few potential topics that could emerge during the discussions and in the proposals. The topics that we've listed on this slide are actually the topics that came out during the consultations of the previous UNEA 4 resolution on mineral resource governance. Next slide, please. And again, on this slide, you will see potential objectives that the proposals could have. So these could range from stock taking of existing national and international activities, but also development of technical documents or the creation of cooperation capacity building platforms, or even the establishment of a group of experts to provide strategic guidance. Next slide, please. In operating paragraph 4, as mentioned before, there's a specific focus on sand, and the part of this resolution will be led, or the implementation of this part of the resolution will be led by UNEP Grid Geneva through its Global Sand Observatory. And maybe just to mention, so the work is very much focusing on extraction of sand and monitoring of sand extraction. And I invite you to visit the website, and also would just to highlight the 2 publications that were recently published by Grid Geneva, especially the last one from 2022, which has also specific recommendations on sand extraction. Next slide, please. The final request in operating paragraph 5 relates to tailings management and the compilation of a report on environmental knowledge gaps on tailings management. We are working on the drafting and development of this report, which will be finalized in October 2023. And this will be based on research, but also inputs that we will receive during the intergovernmental meetings. But we're also planning to organize a number of expert roundtables on this topic. And maybe just briefly as a background, UNEP has been engaged on the topic of tailings management for the last few years, specifically through the co-convening of a global industry standard on tailings management, which was co-convened together with the Mining Industry Association, ICMM, and Principles for Responsible Investment. And we are still partnering with Principles of with PRI for the establishment of an independent institute which will oversee the effective implementation of the standard. Next slide, please. We've listed here, in the interest of time, also further resources which you may wish to have a look at and which will provide more information on the implementation of this resolution. And I'll stop here. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Charlotte, for this very clear presentation on next steps in the implementation of the resolution, and also on how to get accreditation with UNEP for those organizations and stakeholders that are not yet accredited, and to allow formal participation. Now, let me turn to our panel. We have a very diverse panel representing different views from a range of stakeholders. Each speaker will have 5 minutes for their inputs. We aim to have time for a short Q&A session at the end of the presentations. I will introduce the speakers as they speak, and I would like to start with Claudia Kamke. She's an Environmental Affairs Officer for the Convention on the Transboundary Effects of Industrial Accident at the United Nations Economic Commission for Europe. Claudia will present UNECE's work in tackling sustainability of minerals through resource and tailings management. Claudia, please, you have the floor.
Thank you very much. Oh, can I speak?
No, it's here.
Yeah, but I can't. Thank you very much for having this opportunity to speak. So indeed, I'm from the Industrial Accidents Convention, which is one of the UNECE multilateral environmental agreements. But I would like to present the perspective and tools of UNECE on tackling sustainability through resource and tailings management. UNECE is a regional commission. However, it has global reach and global legal instruments and frameworks to offer. For example, it offers global frameworks to address the sustainable mineral resource governance through the UNFC, the United Nations Framework Classification for Resources, and the UNRMS, the United Nations Resource Management System. It also offers legal instruments to strengthen mine tailings safety and reduce accidental water pollution, for example, through the Industrial Accidents Convention, which is a regional instrument, but also, for example, through the Water Convention, which is global and has around 20 parties from outside the region, or 20 countries from outside the region, which are currently in the accession process. And UNECE also offers assessments and recommendations to improve environmental policies through the environmental performance reviews. And also these tools are available for countries beyond the region, as was done for Mongolia. Let me take a moment to walk you through the different tools that we have briefly. So UNFC and UNRMS are global tools to manage natural resources in an integrated and sustainable manner, and also in a unified manner. They can be applied or they can be used by different stakeholder groups like governments, industry, investors, civil society. UNFC and UNRMS actually integrate environmental, social, and economic objectives, and they can be applied to minerals, to petroleum, to nuclear energy, to renewable energy as well. So they can be applied in a wide range of topics. And as you can see here, for example, UNFC has been applied in a European Commission-led initiative to harmonize raw material resource management and to establish centers of excellence, also in Africa, in the CIS region, and also several other countries like China, India, Indonesia, Kazakhstan have implemented or adopted the frameworks, and also in Latin America, pilot studies are progressing. And every year, UNECE organizes a UNECE Resource Management Week. This year it is in April, and indeed it will be held also back-to-back with the sub-regional consultation for Eastern Europe that you mentioned on the resolution. Now, moving to the UNECE multilateral environmental agreements, the Water Convention and the Industrial Accidents Convention have a joint expert group that was established 25 years ago. And this expert group has developed different guidance materials and safety guidelines over the years. Among others, the UNECE safety guidelines and good practices for tailings management facilities. It was developed to reduce the frequency and severity of failures at tailings management facilities, and it was also endorsed and recommended for implementation under both the Water and Industrial Accidents Convention. It contains safety principles and recommendations for governments, competent authorities, and operators. And in order to improve the practical implementation of the convention of the safety guidelines, a TMF methodology has been developed, and this completely improved the understanding and identification of risks in the UNECE region. It resulted in the identification of 237 tailings management facilities in Central Asia, out of which 25% are actually potentially having transboundary effects. So here again, we see tailings management facilities management is not a matter of national concern, but it is a matter of regional concern. And it has also been applied to map tailings management facilities in the river basin, for example, in the Sodaya River Basin and also in the Danube River Basin by ICPDR, the International Commission for the Protection of the Danube River. UNECE supports countries also in building capacity to better understand and manage their tailings risks. Therefore, different on-site trainings at tailings management facilities have been implemented in Central Asia, like Kazakhstan and Tajikistan, but also in Armenia, in Romania, and other countries. In 2020, parties to the Industrial Accidents Convention adopted a decision on strengthening mine tailings safety within and beyond the UNECE region. The decision contains concrete actions that parties wish to take in order to further improve tailings safety. For example, to use and implement the safety guidelines, to improve interinstitutional coordination, to review their legislation and policies on mine tailings safety. And also countries beyond the UNECE region are invited to actually take action and implement the decision. So how do countries implement it? For example, UNECE supports countries in the establishment of interinstitutional working groups on tailings safety and the prevention of accidental water pollution. These working groups serve as platforms for cooperation and policy dialogue on the subject matter, and also to review good practices and policies and legislation. Kazakhstan and Tajikistan have successfully implemented or established these working groups formally last year, and Uzbekistan is in the process of considering that as well. Then another, I think, important subject is also that with climate change and more extreme weather events, TMF accidents are more likely to happen. So it's important to integrate also NATEC risk management. So in natural hazard triggered technological disasters should be prevented. And to this end, UNECE supports countries in integrating these risks, for example, in their national self-assessments and action plans. In 2021, Kyrgyzstan successfully updated its self-assessment and action plan under the Convention's Assistance and Cooperation Program to do that. And also UNECE regularly organizes seminars, for example, through the Joint Expert Group on NATEC risks. At UNECE, there is also the environmental performance reviews, as I mentioned before. And the environmental performance reviews, they contain different recommendations, among others, on the Industrial Accidents Convention and tailings management. And in 2021, the convention supported Central Asian countries in developing specific action plans to help them implement the EPR recommendations related to tailings management and the convention. Another key event that I would like to mention is the endorsement of a roadmap for action to strengthen mine tailings safety within and beyond the UNECE region. It contains 5 key objectives, starting with improving the understanding of tailings management facilities, addressing them, preventing NATEC accidents and water pollution, and exchanging also information regularly on these subjects. For each of these objectives, countries agreed on specific actions that parties could take, but also other UNECE member states and also UN member states beyond the region. And here you can see, for example, that the roadmap basically contains concrete actions for this biennium and the next biennium, among others. Countries, I mean, knowing that countries have different levels of implementation and pace in making progress, of course, countries will focus on improving their understanding of tailings risks, reviewing and updating legislation and policies, establishing or using existing coordination mechanisms to improve policies in this regard. And also countries will more coherently report on tailings management facilities under the convention. And in the next biennium, then on that basis, we believe that this will also improve joint understanding of risks. An overview could be prepared of such tailings risks, and also UNECE could facilitate multi-stakeholder dialogue in this regard, depending, of course, on the availability of funds. So with this, let me say that, you see that basically we would also be happy to support the implementation of the UNEA 5/12 resolution through the contributing to the report on tailings, on knowledge gaps on tailings management, but also these expert dialogues, as you mentioned them. And with this, let me just say that there's one interesting toolkit available as well, a toolkit and training for strengthening mine tailings safety, which has been developed to strengthen mine tailings safety and management practices, and it's available also as a hub to share knowledge on tailings management facilities. So you will find there also latest reports. And thank you very much for the time. There's a lot of work that we have done in this area, so sorry if I took a bit more time. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Claudia. Indeed, there is a lot of work going on under the UNECE in the pan-European region, but also beyond. And thank you also for your active engagement and contribution to the implementation of the resolution, this tailings part. Now I would like to give the floor to Mr. Xavier Edelman, the founder and vice president of the World Resources Forum, which is a platform to support multi-stakeholder dialogue on natural resources with a strong focus on minerals. Xavier will explain that what the World Resources Forum is and it's relevant for this process. Please.
Thank you, Laura. Ladies and gentlemen, I would like to thank the organizers for inviting us to this most important event. I would like to provide the best regards from our President, Bruno Oberle, and our Executive Manager, Matthias Schlup, who could not make it today. Now, how will I go forward here? Excuse me. Yes. About the World Resources Forum. The World Resources Forum Association is an international non-profit organization empowering multi-stakeholder collaboration, improving knowledge, co-create solutions, build capacity, and for a fair, sustainable use of natural resources, bringing together science, business, governments, and society. It was founded in 2012 as a spin-off of EMPA, the Swiss Federal Laboratories for Material Science and Technology. It was all from the very beginning, thank you, was supported by the Federal Office of Environment of Switzerland, and the headquarters is in the EMPA buildings in St. Gallen. Then we have 3 pillars: the forum, the projects, and the knowledge. The forum is an inclusive space for solutions-oriented dialogue. The projects are mobilizing concerted actions for sustainable resource use, and the knowledge is co-creation of knowledge accessible as a global public good. Then, since 2009, we have organized conferences in Japan, Switzerland, China, Peru, Australia, Costa Rica, Finland, Belgium, and Ghana. And every second year, we try to be in Switzerland. The topic of this year's World Resources Forum, which is taking place from September 4 to 6 in Geneva, is rethinking value for planetary well-being. And this means a global dialogue to make resource use a powerful driver for planetary well-being. We are supported by the Federal Office of the Environment, by UN Environment, by the International Resource Panel, but also by EMPA, our mother. We have in the conference 3 tracks. One is covering sufficiency, second one is value chains, and the third one, digitalization. I will now go on the track to value chains, since this is the track which has a lot of commonalities with these initiatives which is presented today. How can we transform the logic and operations along the full life cycle of value chains, from extraction to regeneration, enabling fairness, resilience, and sustainability? This is, let's say, the general question. And for this, we have some thematic areas: transforming value chains, drivers, challenges, examples, circular and regenerative economy, governance of raw materials, value chains, responsible sourcing, life cycle approaches, and also trade and finance. In color, you see those where we have, let's say, the commonalities with these GMII activities. The topics which are covered are going from energy, our built environment, trading, tailings management, mineral resource, circular economy, secondary resources, critical raw materials, informal sector, life cycle, and others more. I will skip to mention more from them. I've forgotten to go on here, but you will have them in the slides. Now, the format of the World Resources Forum 2023, it is a hybrid format. In this way, we can leverage the benefits of meeting in person while ensuring accessibility on a global scale and lowering our environmental footprint. The conference sessions will cover lighthouse talks, panel debates, interactive labs, scientific sessions, workshops, and networking. And very important to mention here, the call for abstracts was end of February, but it is extended to March 10 upon request, and the submission of workshops is still open. And you see then at the right, the regional intergovernmental consultations, which are covered from March to July, will then followed by the global intergovernmental meeting on 7th and 8th of September in Geneva, just after this conference. Thank you and see you in Geneva.
Thank you very much, Xavier. We really look forward to the discussion and the World Resources Forum and for all these synergies that can be found between the discussion there and at the global meeting at the end of the year in September. Now I would like to turn to Dennis Fritsch, who is an Associate Program Lead in Nature at the UNEP Finance Initiative. Dennis will discuss why financial actors are very relevant to the discussion and how they can play a leading role as well in addressing the sustainability of minerals. We are slightly behind schedule, so I will ask you to really stick to the 5 minutes, please. Thank you very much.
Thanks very much for this kind introduction and for the invitation. I'll do my best to stick to the 5 minutes. So I'm hoping this. Oh, there you go. So my name is Dennis Fritsch, and I'm the Associate Lead for Nature. For those who don't know us, we are a partnership between the UN Environment Program and the private financial sector, and we work with almost 500 banks, insurers, and institutional investors to develop the global sustainable finance agenda. So this is just a quick overview slide of UNEP FI. We do catalyze action across the financial system to align economies with sustainable development. And as I just mentioned, we're the UN partner for the finance sector, and we've established some of the most important sustainability-oriented frameworks within the finance industry to bring together the UN with a global group of banks, insurers, and investors. The PRI, the Principles for Responsible Investment, were mentioned earlier, but we have similar market-led and market initiatives for banking and insurance that cover most of the market globally. And so what we do is that we convene these financial institutions through our frameworks on a voluntary basis to work with us and each other to find practical solutions to overcome the many sustainability challenges facing the world today. So topics that we cover range from limiting greenhouse gas emissions, protecting nature, promoting a circular economy, and supporting financial inclusion, for example. And these solutions that we develop together with these financial institutions provide a blueprint of sort for others in the financial sector to tackle similar challenges and evolve their businesses along a sustainable pathway. And this development and creation and adoption of such blueprints, of course, also informs policymakers that are concerned with such issues and about what would constitute appropriate for regulation for the finance sector at large, which is in the end obviously what we are also aiming for. At the bottom of the screen here, you can see we have some current work and some future work that is relevant to today's conversation about mining and metals. And I want to dive right in to our ocean finance stream. So we convene a community of practice on sustainable blue finance, the ocean finance, whatever you want to call it. That is a subset of our wider 500 institution strong membership that really specifically focuses on issues relating to the ocean and trying to align financial activities with SDG 14. And we convene banks, insurers, and investors around the 14 sustainable blue economy finance principles that you might have heard of and you can see on the left And what that really means in practice is that we develop guidance with them. You can see our two main flagship guidances that we've published over the last 2 years here on the screen, Turning the Tide and Diving Deep. They focus on different blue sectors, but really, you know, I see the link to this to our resources has been shared in the chat. So if you're keen to read more about this topic in general, then feel free to follow that session, that link. But specifically on mining, I want to highlight 2 work streams. One of them is on dredging. That is dredging and marine aggregate extraction that we worked closely with Grid Geneva colleagues on last year. And dredging is, of course, needed for, you know, it is, of course, a harmful activity, but is needed for some blue activities like the installation of offshore wind installations in parks, for example. So you can dredging paper following the link that's in the chat. Secondly, we also published a briefing paper for financial actors on deep sea mining. That's, of course, a very new topic and is not currently commercially taking place. However, developments point toward potential commencement of deep sea mining for metals as early as July 2023, so this year, which is why we found it necessary to develop a short guidance that really addresses the potential impacts, environmental impacts on the deep sea of this activity, but crucially for our audience also highlights the significant financial, reputation, regulatory and operational risks of financing or supporting these activities as they currently stand and are planned to go ahead. As you can see on the slide, we have come to the conclusion in this paper that financing deep sea mining activities in the current situation is not consistent with our sustainable blue economy finance principles. But really what this briefing paper does is it lays out how banks, insurers and investors can focus efforts on alternative strategies that would reduce the environmental footprint of terrestrial mining, following a lot of the great guidance that you know, colleagues that are in the meeting today are producing, but also supporting the transition toward a circular economy. And I just wanted to, for 1 minute, go into a bit more depth on what I mean when I say there is a high risk for financial institutions. Currently, there does not exist a robust precautionary approach for this activity to safeguard ocean health against the potential ecological and system impact of deep sea mining. That is, of course, based on science, but specifically for financial institutions, there are a couple of quite high risks that range from reputational to lack of regulatory certainty, at least at this stage, as well as operational, because this is quite a new undertaking. As I said, deep sea mining is not happening commercially yet, so it is unclear how it might safely happen. And also there's questions about the social license to operate and community consent. And of course, deep sea mining might also have negative impact on other sectors like fishing, shipping, subsea cabling, pharmaceutical and scientific research. But as I said, if you're interested to learn more about deep sea mining, but also dredging and other blue sectors, feel free to scan that QR code here. Our resources are available for free. I'll also put that link in the chat again. And I have one more slide, which is about looking ahead really into the future. So as the nature team of UNEA is also quite heavily involved in the so-called task force on nature-related financial disclosures. I wanted to just share some planned work for this year that is related to mining. So we are part of the TNFD Secretariat, which is leading several pilot projects to implement this framework across financial actors last year and this year as well. The TNFD is, of course, trying to develop a framework that will allow financial actors to disclose what nature risks their portfolios are exposed to and what financial impact a loss of biodiversity would have on their bottom line. So it's quite crucial in terms of reporting. And we are planning to look at, in this case, land-based mining portfolios with 1 or 2 financial actors in collaboration with the International Council on Mining and Metals, that was mentioned earlier as well by Charlotte, this year. Our focus will likely be around understanding current challenges, of course, for nature-related disclosure in the mining sector, including what information would financial institutions need from mining companies to make appropriate decisions, and also what financial products are needed to push a transition to increase nature-positive financial flows. So this is really what we're thinking about this year. Again, I can update colleagues once we have a proper agenda for this year. But this is the ongoing work, and I'm very, very happy that we've been invited to speak at this during this event. And just wanted to also say that it is very important to have the voice of the financial sector, on the table, at the table, and that's what UNEA brings to the conversation. And with that, I hope I kept to 5 minutes, and we'll hand back to you.
Thank you very much, Denis, and indeed, thank you very much for giving visibility to the financial sector and your work on developing the global sustainable finance agenda linked to mining, also referring to frontier issues such as deep sea mining, where knowledge is still developing and where important discussions are currently being held on this topic at the International Seabed Authority. Now I would like to give the floor to Jodian Wang, who is a coordinator for the Commonwealth Youth Climate Change Network, and who will speak about the role of youth in minerals and metals for the transition. Jodian, thank you very much. You have the floor.
Thank you so much for the floor, and dear Excellencies, esteemed panelists and colleagues, on behalf of the Commonwealth Youth Climate Change Network, as well as the Children Youth Major Group 2 UNEP, our gratitude for hosting this briefing and this space. The adoption of UNEA Resolution 5/12 has built confidence amongst youth that a globally coordinated efforts are in train to build capacity and bridge knowledge gaps towards enhancing the environmental sustainability of minerals and metals for current and all future generations. And now it's essential that we prioritize their implementation in an inclusive, accessible, and transparent manner across all segments of the value chain, from societal demand creation to waste management. Now, to ensure that intergenerational collaboration remains central to the operationalization of this resolution, on behalf of youth, we call on the following. First, in regards to mining activities, we strongly encourage all relevant stakeholders to embed intergenerational equity in principle and in practice, and acknowledge the permanent and irreversible effects of mining, especially deep sea mining. Natural resources are shared inheritance, and from the deep sea to the living lands, we really must ensure that future generations are not deprived of their rights to prosperous and fulfilling lives and to a clean and healthy environment. We also advocate for the development of a resource inventory database covering land and deep sea areas maintained for open dissemination as a public good to guarantee access to real-time disaggregated data on environmental and social indicators in the areas of extraction. To echo the previous panelists, we also stress the importance of interoperability and consistency in standards and principles, and they must be co-developed with those most affected. With the proliferation of national critical metal strategies currently, it's important that we avoid fragmentation. And interoperability is not only crucial for governmental collaboration, but also decision useful for investors to allocate capital to companies abiding by the highest operational standards. Secondly, along the metals and minerals value chain, the current momentum for increased renewable technologies adoption could actually improve the lives of millions of people in resource-rich countries if managed responsibly. And we underscore that it is non-negotiable that mining communities capture greater environmental, social, and economic value addition and industrial upgrading. Countries that are home to principal reserves of minerals should result in increased public revenue, improved infrastructure, more decent jobs, and increased spending on local businesses, health, and education. This is especially the case for communities residing in mining areas. Ultimately, these measures will strengthen the social infrastructure and institutions in the promotion of a peaceful, just, and inclusive societies that are integral to sustainable development. Now, thirdly, in regards to the utilization of metals and minerals and waste management, we must set our ambition towards realizing full metal circulation through creating cost incentives and parity for circular goods and services, and commercializing materials that are produced, used, and recovered safely to reduce our linear demand for finite resources. We do call on relevant stakeholders to conduct macroeconomic analyses of metal flow to identify the circularity gaps and develop regulations, product design principles, and processing technologies to bridge them. Our current linear model of metal production and consumption puts us at risk of repeating our mistakes with fossil fuels in the net zero transition. It's vital to make an imaginative effort to consider the interests of future beings in present decision-making so as to create future-proofed policies on climate and environmental matters. The work to strengthen environmental due diligence is already under its way, and as youth, we applaud the initiatives undertaken by multilateral organizations such as the OECD, the Commonwealth Blue Charter, and the UNECE's recent establishment of the Resource Management Young Expert Group in protecting our global commons in the transition while centering children and youth as key stakeholders. We strongly encourage the International Seabed Authority to accredit youth-based organizations in its governance processes. Ultimately, this is about how we protect the wealth, the well-being, and the prosperity of future generations. So we call on all actors to do the right thing for the future and of all human beings and all living creatures. Children and youth, especially youth workers in the mining industry, indigenous youth, youth with disabilities, migrants and refugees, and youth from developing and least developed countries and other marginalized backgrounds must be and remain key stakeholders in this process. We look forward to working with all of you on this critical topic now and moving forward, and thank you so much for the insights that's being shared today at this meeting. Thank you, and I yield the rest of my time.
Thank you very much, Judian. It's really important to hear the voice of the youth and who are really important key stakeholders. So we look forward to hear more about your views and ideas. Now I would like to give the floor to another very important actor in this area, the Intergovernmental Forum on Mining, Minerals, Metals and Sustainable Development. And I would like to invite Grégoire Bellois, who is Senior Policy Advisor to the IGF, and who will present their work to advance good mining governance. Please.
Yes, thank you, Laura, and good morning, Excellencies, partners and colleagues. So my name is Grégoire Bellois. I'm Senior Policy Advisor within the Intergovernmental Forum on Mining, Minerals, Metals and Sustainable Development, IGF for short. So IGF is a global forum of mining producing countries from all over the world. It currently has 80 members, and the role is to improve mining governance to help achieve the UN Sustainable Development Goals. IGF is a voluntary initiative that was created through the United Nations in 2005 to help mining countries gather together to discuss and advance toward sustainable development. Initially, it was funded by Canada, who also helped organize the annual meeting to help countries meet together to discuss these topics. In 2011, the IISD, the International Institute for Sustainable Development, has been involved to support the work of IGF as a consultant initially, and in 2015, IISD became the role of the secretariat of the IGF. So it provides additional resources to be able to provide more support to member countries, such as in-country assessments, different capacity building, technical assistance, guidance for governments, and gathering at different conferences to help disseminate the information and the whole knowledge. So this is a map of the member country of the IGF. As you can see, it's quite widely spread all around the globe, from the America, Africa, Europe, Asia, even in the Pacific area, with Fiji as a member. The main product or the main tool of the IGF is the mining policy framework, the MPF, which has been developed in collaboration with the member country in 2013, and it's designed to reflect governance standards that help government ensure that their mining sector really contribute to sustainable development in their countries. It's organized around 6 main pillars, which are legal and policy environment, financial benefit optimization, socio-economic benefit optimization, environmental management, post-mining transition, and artisanal and small-scale mining. And this is the main area, I would say all the work of the IGF is organized around these 6 main pillars of mining governance. And as it's already 10-year old, the MPF is currently being reviewed and updated. So we are at the consultation phase. So we also encourage you to have a look and provide your input to this consultation. And the final update will be released at our next AGM in November 2023. So in terms of environmental management, that's why we're here today. IGF develops this last formal document and guidance for governments on environmental management and mining governance. So it's a set of recommendations and guidelines for governments with 4 main topics that are water, biodiversity, mine waste, and emergency preparedness and response. And based on these documents, there are specific tools that have been developed, such as training, capacity building, technical assistance, but different documents to help the country better advance their own policies and regulation. And what's also interesting is we published some case study, and we try to have as much case study as possible because it's really actual example that help government understand what's happening in other countries or in other places of the world to help them better manage their natural resources. And more generally, the other tools developed by IGF, they cover other aspects of the mining industry. There are 3 other formal IGF guidance for governments. One on ISM. ISM stands for artisanal and small-scale mining, on local content, and on environmental and social impact assessments. And again, based on this basic document, you have a set of tools that are developed, some toolkits, some training, some capacity building, etc. We also provide other guidelines and guidance to governments on issues such as taxation, mine closure, gender, among others, with specific documentation provided. And we do also some pieces of research on new technologies and its impact on the mining sector, the climate change, the critical minerals, and any other kind of research that may interest the member countries. And what's interesting and what it's a demand-driven process. So the countries that come to us and say, oh, we lack knowledge on this area, can you help us? So this is mostly the work that IGF is doing. So I didn't take too long. Thank you very much for your attention. Thanks, Laura. And if you have any questions, yes, I'm here.
Thank you very much, Grégoire, for your presentation and also the important work IGF is doing, and having you also joining the discussion is very important. Now I'm pleased to give the floor to Mrs. Tatiana Aguilar, Mining and Metals Industry Manager at the World Economic Forum. You will explain what the WEF does in mining metals and why this work is also relevant to this process. Tatiana, please, you have the floor.
Thank you, Laura, and thank you to UNEP for inviting us to participate in this conversation. I think this is very relevant also for the work that the World Economic Forum does, not only in mining, but across different industries. So to start, and knowing that I have only 5 minutes, I have 3 takeaways that I want to share with you. That's in the next slide. If you could help me with that, please. So the first one, what we do, the World Economic Forum is the international organization for public-private collaboration. We have more than 700 partners, and that include not only mining and metals companies or companies in other industries, but also civil society, academia, youth, communities, international organizations, and we bring together those stakeholders to contribute to the improvement of the state of the world. And I know this is ambitious, but this is the mission that we have, and that is in general what we try to do with all the initiatives and the programs that we develop and partner with other organizations like you. One example, we have a memorandum of understanding with the United Nations in topics like financing the Sustainable Development Goals and the Agenda for 2030, and that includes, of course, climate and energy transition. The second takeaway is that our initiatives, of course, and the workstream address the Sustainable Development Goals. We have been working on this initiatives for more than 50 years, but once the SDGs are in place, it gave us a framework to work for that improvement of the state of the world. And as I mentioned before, we developed these cross-industry and multi-stakeholder initiatives and partnerships to help the transformation of industries, and that includes, of course, mining and metals, and that is what I'm going to talk about in the next minutes. So we have, if we could go to the next slide, please. We have, as I mentioned, the role of the forum in the next one. And in this one, I just want to highlight one thing, and it's the belief that no single entity can improve the state of the world. And I think that is why we value these scenarios, when we can not only share the information, but hopefully propose or consolidate collaboration across different topics. If we go to the next one, and the next one, please. This is a general framework that shows the way in which we see how is the transformation of materials industries. That is the case of mining as well. And we could agree that in general, all the industries are transforming to be more responsible, more productive, and more resilient. And we could have discussions about this wording. It could be more sustainable. But in general, we would think that this is a framework for the transformation of industries. And of course, this transformation doesn't happen within the industry. We have some enablers. Companies are usually working on those capital services, technology. Then the government play an important role in policy and regulation, the environment. And then we have a global landscape that we have seen recently how increasing importance it has. And which is interesting is that we're trying to work in initiatives that go and cross these socioeconomic systems, because we see also that mining and metals have an opportunity to transform mobility, energy, infrastructure. So if we go to the next slide, I'm going to focus in the initiatives that some of the initiatives that we have nowadays in the forum. The first one, and very relevant for the current context, is securing minerals for the energy transition. And some of the organizations here have participated in some of these discussions. We are trying to develop a risk management approach to the supply-demand gap of critical minerals. We are not focusing on demand and supply, but we are focusing on the risks emerging from that gap. And I think Jody already mentioned like some of those risks that we are seeing for the next year. So we are already trying to work that in those risk with some of organizations. UNECE and UNESCAP are also participating in the working group for this initiative. We have another initiative in Scope 3 emissions. We are trying to streamline the procedures in Scope 3 emissions and see if that could help transparency in decarbonization and then reduction of emissions, which is the ultimate goal. We have other initiatives that are not led by the mining and metals companies in the forum, but by other cross-industry leadership. And we have some in net zero in steel, in aluminum, or we are also working in clean power for the future of industries, which of course include mining and metals. And these initiatives, and as I said, this is just an example of the initiatives that we have, because we have also some in oceans or in nature that are also involved in the mining and metal sector. All of these initiatives are of course related to the SDGs and to the agenda for 2030. So we are keen on collaborating with you in any of them. So please reach out if you have any question about the initiatives or the topics that we are developing at the forum. Just to close the intervention and keep my 5 minutes, the next steps that we see in this collaboration are continue working in minerals for the energy transition and collaborate with some other organizations involving different stakeholders for addressing those risks, and hopefully to have an alliance, a global collaboration platform to tackle those risks. In Scope 3 emissions, we are trying to reach out with the financial and the regulatory institutions. So hopefully, and after the presentation of Jody, we could also discuss about the evolution of this topic. So thank you for the space. I have already mentioned this. Thank you so much.
Thank you very much, Tatiana, for your very clear presentation and for all those partnerships and initiatives you refer to. It's also very interesting to learn more about what the WEF is doing on that. Now, last but not least, for the stakeholders part of this session, I would like to give the floor to Marcos Aureliana, the UN Special Rapporteur on Toxic and Human Rights. Human rights are an essential part also to this discussion, even though the focus is on the environment. We cannot separate the two. So you will present also your perspective on the collaboration on this UNEA resolution. You have the floor.
Thank you very much, Madam Chair, for giving me the floor, and thanks to the Geneva Environment Network for its invitation. The UNEA resolution that we are discussing today has opened the door for a most timely debate at the global level on minerals and metals. And I wish to make 3 points of certain preambular paragraphs in the resolution, jumping right into it. PP3, or preambular paragraph 3, defines the scope of the resolution. It talks about how the scope includes the full life cycle of minerals and metals, and then it lists several stages. And I wish to highlight this because in my last report, thematic report to the General Assembly presented last October, it was focused on toxics and indigenous peoples, and it documented how the extraction of minerals and metals is outsized in the lands of indigenous peoples, 50 to 80%, and often done without due regard to standards such as free and prior informed consent or meaningful consultations or adequate arrangements for equitable benefit sharing. So the impact of extraction is sizable. Similarly, on processing, the impacts on water pollution, more than 100 million tons of hazardous wastes released to rivers and stream every year, and this including hazardous substances such as lead and arsenic and cadmium and mercury and chromium and cyanide, and other pollutants that are well known in their harms to human health, including neurotoxic and carcinogenic. But I want to highlight that it's not just extraction or processing, it's also refining. And there, I think the resolution is quite important in its scope because many of refineries, such as for gold, are found in industrialized countries. And so this resolution then enables what is a North-South dialogue. It highlights the importance of supply chain due diligence and the need for a global partnership to address these issues. Given the time, I will quickly jump to a second comment on PP6, which talks about the specific environmental challenges related to small-scale mining. Excuse me. Artisanal and small-scale gold mining, ASGM for the acronym, is by far the largest emitter of mercury to the global environment. And this has disproportionate impacts on people that are already in vulnerable situations. Workers are in the fence line, but then also children, given their higher sensitivity because of the size of their bodies and development. Women, especially in childbearing age, indigenous peoples that rely on fish that are contaminated with mercury. In September of last year, I presented a thematic report to the Human Rights Council on this issue that includes analysis of the gaps and shortcomings of the Minamata Convention on Mercury, which regards small-scale mining as an allowed use for mercury. Now, I present and submit that this is a shortcoming that needs to be changed. Now, in the debate that has followed, I've often encountered the argument that the problem is multifaceted and does not lend itself to simplistic solutions such as a ban or even criminal activity. But with that logic, the use of criminal law to address environmental issues such as in CITES, the Convention on International Trade in Endangered Species, or in the Basel Convention on Transboundary Movement of Hazardous Wastes, or the Montreal Protocol on ozone-depleting substances, for example, they would not have a place. So there's nothing simple about environmental crime. The bottom line here is that we need to redouble efforts to make the promise of no more Minamatas a reality in the world. And the last comment I'll offer is on PP8, which talks about clean technologies and their importance for combating climate change. And so this is in the context of decarbonization. This is ongoing work for the mandate on toxics and human rights. I am preparing a thematic report that I will present to the Human Rights Council in September later this year on the interface between decarbonization and detoxification, the need for integrated solutions on both fronts. There's a call for inputs that's live at this time. Some of the challenges that some proposed climate solutions are being put forward without regard to full life cycle impacts. There are also false solutions on the table, such as generation of hydrogen using fossil fuels. In this context, we often hear the argument that given the existential climate crisis, environmental safeguards need to be waived. There's no time to conduct environmental impact assessment or conduct consultations, or we must do away with zoning, etc. So there's answers to this. One is that safeguards are critical to prevent environmental harm and thus to uphold the right to a healthy environment. Another is that the human right to science requires alignment between the science and regulatory responses. And then, of course, the implementation of existing laws and adoption of new laws is important. So there, the need to strengthen the environmental rule of law. I'm already a minute over my time, Madam Chair. I will simply conclude by pointing out that, as you mentioned, the environment cannot be addressed effectively in isolation from human rights. And recognition of the right to a healthy environment at the global level in this regard opens the door for a properly framed debate. And the second point is that this is an opportunity moment to be ahead of the curve and to address the expected surge and increase in demand. Thank you very much for your attention.
Thank you very much. This was very inspiring, and thank you for, as you said, the human rights dimension is really important because ultimately it's human well-being that is affected. As you said, the problem is multifaceted, but that shouldn't discourage us from finding innovative ideas. You also refer to integrated solution, a global approach, the full life cycle, which are really key elements in this resolution and in scoping the discussion ahead. Now we are really coming to the end of the session, but I still want to invite a representative from a government to also provide their perspective. And normally we should have online the representative from Senegal, Khadija Dramé, who is the Deputy Coordinator of Legal Affairs Units at the Ministry of Environment and Sustainable Development in Senegal. And if you would like to also say a few words on the importance of states engaging in this process, that would be great. We have maybe 3 minutes if you can shorten your intervention. Thank you very much, Khadija.
Merci beaucoup, Laura. C'est bon, vous m'entendez?
Yes, we hear you very well. So Khadija will speak in French, I think, and I will try to translate the key element in English. Khadija, vous avez 3 minutes, si c'est possible. Merci beaucoup.
Rapidement, je vais intervenir sur 3 points. Le premier point va porter sur le rôle des gouvernements à implémenter la résolution. Et sur ce point, je pense que la mission première des gouvernements dans le cadre de la mise en œuvre de la résolution, c'est qu'ils doivent mettre en place toutes les actions possibles pour réussir la mise en œuvre. Et en premier lieu, il faudra que les États mettent en place un cadre favorable d'abord au niveau national, en désignant d'abord pour chaque État un point focal. Et je pense que certains l'ont déjà fait. Et pour le reste, je pense qu'ils devront mettre en place ces points focaux. Ils doivent aussi participer massivement aux différentes consultations régionales, d'adapter aussi leur politique minière aux modes de production et de consommation durable, comme c'est indiqué dans la résolution 5.12. Et proposer aussi et identifier des pistes de solutions pour atteindre les objectifs de la résolution. Je continue ou je laisse quelqu'un traduire?
Yeah, if we can go back to the previous slide, just very quickly, you have the slide actually in English, but just to say that Khadija explained that the primary mission of governments in this implementation of this resolution is really to participate massively in the regional consultation, nominate focal points. We'll still have a lot of member states that still haven't nominated focal points, so please go ahead with that, and also adapt their mining policy to SCP patterns and try to identify the solution to achieve the objective of the resolution. And that's the work ahead during the regional consultation and the global meeting in September. Khadija, je vous laisse continuer.
Oui, merci beaucoup. Et le deuxième point va porter sur la situation du Sénégal en lien avec les aspects environnementaux de la gestion des minéraux et des métaux. Et le Sénégal est un État minier et nous avons 7 régions administratives dans lesquelles on exploite des mines. Et nous sommes confrontés à des enjeux environnementaux qui sont liés à cette exploitation minière. Et nous avons comme premier enjeu, c'est la réhabilitation des sites miniers, parce qu'au niveau du Sénégal, il y a plusieurs entreprises qui n'ont pas un schéma de réhabilitation adéquat. Et l'autre enjeu également, c'est l'alimentation du fonds de réhabilitation minière, parce que les entreprises doivent alimenter un fonds pour garantir la réhabilitation des sites miniers. Et malheureusement, toutes les entreprises n'ont pas encore alimenté ce fonds. Et l'autre enjeu, c'est la gestion des résidus miniers, parce qu'actuellement, au niveau du Sénégal, on a un manque d'infrastructures de gestion de ces résidences minières. Et comme autre enjeu également, c'est par rapport à l'extraction du sable marin, parce qu'au Sénégal, on a interdit l'extraction du sable marin. Et actuellement, on s'est retourné vers l'exploitation du sable de dune. Maintenant, puisque c'est une ressource qui est tarissable, là également, je pense que c'est un enjeu qui devra être pris en charge. Et l'autre enjeu majeur auxquelles le Sénégal est confronté par rapport à cette exploitation minière, c'est l'extraction minière artisanale qui n'est pas gérée de manière écologiquement rationnelle parce que les exploitants utilisent des produits chimiques qui sont extrêmement dangereux, le mercure et le cyanure. Là également, je pense que ce sont des raisons, en tout cas, ce sont tous ces enjeux qui font que le Sénégal a vraiment intérêt à ce que cette résolution soit mise en œuvre sous toutes ses formes.
Thank you very much, Khadija. So Khadija mentioned Senegal major challenges with respect to rehabilitation of mining sites, tailings management, and also because there is a lack of infrastructure for that, and also issues related to sand extraction, as well as ASM, which is not yet managed in a sustainable way. Thank you very much, Khadija, for your very interesting input and this sharing the Senegal experience. Sorry, you have still another slide. Sorry to cut you.
Yeah, it is the last slide. It is the last slide. Yes, yes. And I would like to say that le Sénégal réitère son engagement, en tout cas pour pousser le processus de mise en œuvre de cette résolution. Le Sénégal a été co-sponsor de la résolution et nous continuons également à faire le plaidoyer au niveau de la sous-région pour que tous les autres États africains qui sont concernés puissent adopter cette résolution minière. Et aussi, le Sénégal compte accueillir la prochaine la consultation régionale pour le pays, pour la région africaine. Merci.
Thank you very much, Khadija. And indeed, it's a very important final word on Senegal engagement in the implementation of this resolution as a mining state and also co-sponsor of the resolution. And we are really very pleased that the regional consultation for Africa will take place in Senegal, and we'll really look forward to come to your country.
Thank you.
Thank you. So now I will not summarize the discussion, which was really rich. We are reaching the end of the session. I just wanted to say a few concluding words. First, I think that the diversity of the panel shows really the importance of the topic and the relevance of the topic to a large range of stakeholders. We heard a lot of about good work and initiative at local, national, regional level from the UNECE, the IGF, and also initiatives from the part of the financial community. And I think in the forthcoming process, we really need to build on what exists, create these synergies, avoid duplication, because it's clear that it's a global issue and we still have gaps. So in the coming months, the member states will develop those non-prescriptive proposals to enhance the sustainability of minerals. And I think we saw in this discussion that the input and expertise and creative ideas from all stakeholders, civil society, businesses, investors, and others are needed to feed into this process. We have to strive for ambitious proposals to address the full life cycle of minerals as mandated by the resolution, and really have this more holistic approach to give the right incentive to all actors across the value chain. So now I would like to again encourage stakeholders to join the discussion, and also member states to nominate further additional focal points. And with that, I wanted to say that we really look forward to continue the discussion during the regional consultation and also the global meeting in Geneva on the 7th and 8th of September. And with that, I would like to thank all the panelists and the audience also for those who have been active in the chat. We will look at your comment and try to follow up in a written manner. Please do not hesitate to contact the panelists or the co-chairs, the secretariat. We are all available for that. Thank you all. And with that, I close the event. Thank you.